Actually, even before I begin, we're having this dialogue here, but before I begin, I was with a friend and colleague from the program that I'm affiliated with in Port Townsend yesterday, and I was taking her along with me. I made a couple stops in my neighborhood, and we met a couple of neighbors, and she had told him why she was in town. She actually was in town as well to do a program yesterday. And she said she was here for the Imagining America conference. And he said, what? And she said, the Imagining America conference. He said, the Imaginary America conference? I said, no, the Imagining America conference. And he said, what is that? This is like virtual? Like people aren't really there? I said, no, this is a real deal thing. And I also want to acknowledge again the great the words that were said to us. I mean, I was even a little choked up. That was the first time that I'd ever been in a situation like that where folks had honored us in that kind of way. And many times in the grand African tradition, when there are gatherings like this, or even small gatherings, people will pour libation to honor the folks who came before. And what they did is really cleanse this space, and they poured this libation, this literary libation over all of us that will hopefully all of us can internalize and take with us as we go on for the rest of this conference and for the rest of our lives in different ways. So I want to thank you, Rose. Thank you, Anne, for those, for your words. You know, part of our dialogue is scripted. Most of it is not. And we're not quite sure where we're going to end up, but we know the direction we're going to go to get there.
We think we know.
You know, but remember that this is art. And art sometimes can be a little messy, and that's okay. We hope to challenge you all and then to leave you all with a gift. You know, as we said, and as Emerging Voices said about us, you know, we wear many hats. And part of this mess is even my doing, because I wear a whole bunch of hats on this head. And I am an artist, I am an academic, and I'm most importantly a community member and a family member. And I'm leading all that up to say that part of the advantage and disadvantage of doing something in your hometown is that your family shows up. So I really just have to acknowledge them too. My wife is here, my twin daughters, one of whom works at the university, is here, and my grandson, who is actually working to help document this conference. He's doing some video editing. So I was really surprised and blessing to do that. But all of that, I mean, that grounding ends up placing us at this question. And it's kind of the opening question that I'll pose to Rose, and we'll see where we go with it. And that's, we have this assumption that higher education needs to engage with communities. Does it hold that community needs to engage with higher education?
Well, I think it is a tough question. On a superficial level, of course, the answer would be yes to both of those questions. We all need one another, especially in this space and place and time where there's so many challenges. But if we dig a little bit more deeply, I think we could problematize both parts of that question. And let me do a little problematizing, especially around the question of whether or not universities necessarily need to assert their value to and importance to community. I know many people in this room have written and addressed this issue in a very discerning way. The tough part of the university waking up once again, because there have been multiple times in this society where folk have made the claim that the university has a responsibility to communities. Sometimes that responsibility has not been lived up to, and the accountability piece has been very low. But the challenge is, I think, that the structures and the assumptions that often make up the academy, whether it be a community college or a research university such as this one, inhibit, contain, or make it almost impossible to do that in what I would call an ethical and fair and open way. Taking my space in place here on the campus of the University of Minnesota as a case in point, what we value epistemologically in terms of knowledge, who is listened to, who is cited, doesn't leave a lot of space for indigenous knowledge, for community knowledge, for, and we'll probably get into this as we talk about Afro-Eco, that the knowledge that has come out of that community-based organization has changed me in ways that I would not have ever imagined.
I hear you.
That the artistic lens and the spiritual lens that it brings to my own work is something that, without being in the middle of it, would not have been possible. And in a space and place where that kind of practice and knowledge of the people is suspect, it's very difficult to say that the university, unless it changes a set of assumptions about how you deal with university and community, needs to come anywhere close to the community. So that's part of my answer, that there are structures that have to be reimagined, there are values and assumptions that have to be interrogated, and then we might come a little closer. I know some of this work is beginning to be done, that the lens of the artist is very important to this process. And I would say that regarding the community's need for the university, certainly there are resources and information, and if done in a way that is respectful and honorable, can be very important to a community space. But I know that we are in a space and place where the community is very serious about the challenges it faces. And it doesn't need answers imposed on it.
That's right.
But it needs to be brought to the so-called experts. And we could go on and on about this, but I'm going to turn that question back to you and ask, what is your take on this? Because you really do have your,
well, I mean,
in all worlds.
Well, but this is part of why this is so good to have this kind of dialogue, because I'm going to start off where you left off.
Okay, wonderful.
And, you know, I live in Frogtown. And for those of you who don't know, Frogtown is a neighborhood in St. Paul, about 15,000 people. It's on the north side of University Avenue. And in Frogtown, many times, it's defined by pathologies. It's the worst of this, it's at the bottom of this, and it's true. I mean, that is one of the poorest neighborhoods in St. Paul. It just recently found out that it even falls behind the city in tree canopy coverage. You know, I mean, they're the fewest number of trees are in Frogtown. High unemployment, on and on and on and on. And because of that, you know, we have seen a wave after wave after wave of students and faculty from a wide range of institutions that come in and will ask a question. So we have come in on the road to many times getting their master's or their doctorate, and so we have been kind of pushed, prodded, poked, surveyed, put under a microscope in a million different ways. And many times then the researcher is gone. And we see maybe the thesis or maybe the study, and sometimes those things don't really even answer the questions or the problems or solve or the issues that are facing us. And sometimes we don't even see that. They're just gone. So that's the no part of this. And does the community need to see any kind of engagement for higher education? And I say no, loudly, on that side of it. You know, my neighborhood doesn't need any more interactions like that. In that sense, we need like higher education. We don't need a higher education drive-by. You know, just to come in and shoot and then they're gone. What we really need are relationships, and relationships that can be long-term and engaging, and in the truest sense of the word. I mean, we've thrown out engaging so much, almost like sustainability, that it doesn't really mean anything anymore. So what we really need are these long-term relationships. And, you know, a good example, and we've mentioned Afro-Eco a couple of times, part of the reason why Rose and I are here is that we are collaborating on creating, in fact, this is our plug here, you know, save the date. 1 year from today, we are working with the University of Minnesota on this conference. This conference that will examine this long tradition and relationship of black folks to the land in particular, but all of us in general. And this is a collaboration between Afro-Eco, this small organization that's run as a collaborative of artists, educators, fathers, sons, mothers, daughters, agriculturalists, all these folks working together to improve the collective condition of, improve the environmental quality of the African American communities in particular, and all communities in general. And we're coming together to share ideas, to share solutions, and even to have fun, in a way. Much like this conference, we're going to have a big part of it that'll be devoted to kind of hands-on environmentalism, including environmental history bike rides, putting folks on the river in different ways. So that's our plug. But saying all that to say, we're collaborating with the Department of African and African American Studies, and with Ann and the Institute of Advanced Studies to bring this thing together. And part of it will be here, and part of it will be in, and part of it will be based in the community, maybe at UROC, the University Research and Outreach Engagement Center in North Minneapolis. But this is part of this ongoing dialogue. Now, we're going to be working on this for the next year. Now, what we're doing here, too, and I say that in front of one of the vice presidents of the university who's here right now, in charge of engagement. This is just kind of the toe in the door for a larger and longer term relationship.
All right. Well, you know, this is a conversation that probably could go on for days, and there are many different positions on it. But one of the issues, and I know this is from more of the academic side of the question, is assuming that the social good is somehow performed by these relationships, and we need to struggle around creating that social good. One of the telephone conversations that we had with Kevin and Paul put on the table the fact that many graduate students and junior faculty are very excited about this work. But speaking of the structures of higher education, either too many classes to be taught or too much research to be done, it becomes a challenge. And when it comes to the time for being evaluated for tenure and promotion, a lot of the times this doesn't matter very much. So from the perspective of someone who's gone down that road, I have just a bit of sympathy, but not a whole lot. I do know that, that there are costs to all of the choices that we make, and that for this new generation of faculty who are newly minted or preparing to come into, quote, higher education, that the choices you make will likely set the trajectory for a lifetime of struggle within the academy. And to break that down just a little bit more, I would say that the folk who seem to be most nervous about connecting with community, and I mean in a deep and sustaining way, and who are much cowered under the pressure of senior colleagues to not get their hands involved there. These are the same people I talk to who are now full professors, who are saying the same thing. And the ones who took that chance and struggled, and who said, let the chips to some extent fall where they may, have gone on to do some of the best work. So I think there is a caution. I think universities do have a responsibility to make sure that tenure codes honor this work, that the assumption that there's only one kind of expert knowledge, that we break open that paradigm in a way that allows for so much of the good work that has to be done to happen, does happen. But I believe ultimately this is a matter of social commitment.
That's right.
It's a matter of paying the price and doing what needs to be done to create the kind of society we say we want to create. And so that's a different paradigm than simply being afraid that if I get my feet in the door and get my toes wet, then that's the end. I don't know what you think about that.
No,
but that's
well,
sort
you know,
of, what I'm
fortunately,
thinking.
well, fortunately and maybe unfortunately,
Yeah,
but maybe
yeah.
more fortunately,
Right.
I haven't had to go down that path.
Right.
I have worked outside of the academy just up until recently. You know, I've been fortunate to be in a program like Goddard's where social change and social practice is something that we emphasize. And actually, we want all students to change the world. So, and there's no tenure there. I mean, so it has a good side and a bad side to it. So I haven't had to go down that road. But, you know, I have many friends, many colleagues that have had those battles. And
including this one.
I wasn't going to say that. No, I remember that too.
Absolutely.
You know, and many of you all I know have gone through that. And I look at some familiar faces out here and see that and know that. And the challenge now is, as Rose had just laid out here for us, is that now it's on you all. Now we have to make sure that that social practice, that an engaged social practice is a part of whatever we do, whether that's making art, whether that's as a sociologist or as a historian, whatever that is, that we recognize that and that we honor that and reward that. You know, I was fortunate to come up through, being a child of the 50s and 60s, came up through the civil rights movement, through the Black Power movement. I was really active in a number of organizations that were working for change and part of the Black Arts movement. And there, you know, one of the tenets that I got from this whole line of cultural nationalist thinking was that we should leave our community. You heard those words there. That we should leave our community more beautiful than we found it. And that tenet still runs through my work and it's a big part of my practice. And we just need to figure out ways that we can honor that and reward that. Now, that's not to say that artists that work completely in their studio are doing anything or might even pull themselves out as much as they could into some hermetic approach to their work. Not to say that that's bad. I mean, we need all of that, but we also need to recognize this thing that's happening now. And when I say this thing that's happening now, I'm not even quite sure what it is or how to describe it. Because many of the artists that are here in this room and many of the folks that you're going to visit with this afternoon are are creating this body of work that that is really motivated by social change, but also, and I just lost my thought there. I'm sitting there running on and running out. I'll probably come back to that.
Okay,
That's
okay.
part of why this is informal here. Now, I may just like hop in there real quick too.
Well,
with this.
I'll give you maybe a little bit
Yeah.
more to hop on, and this is another kind of thing that's related to the one that we're talking about, and it's this whole idea that when you're doing this kind of activist scholarship, if you will, or activist art, is it really art?
Right.
Is it really scholarship?
Yeah.
And I just happen to think that's the wrong question, and it comes from a paradigm that we really need to really break open. And I know that the constraints of building a, shall we say, a career, that whole set of assumptions winnow back into this. How good
Absolutely.
is it? And I would, who's making those evaluations on whose set of assumptions, whose legacy and history? And I know this plays out in the arts, but it certainly plays out in disciplines and fields. And I think that what this moment is that we are really breaking open a kind of deadly Eurocentrism.
Absolutely.
That has had only a singular notion of what counts for knowledge, and that the good work that's done in this space can allow us a fuller, robust, and even a better way of dealing with the issues that confront us if there is an opening to other ways of knowing, if you will.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Rose, and you pulled me right back in
I
here
thought I
too.
might.
Thank you. You wrote me right back in here. And that where I was going earlier, I was going right there to that same point. I was going to say how these are really frustrating and hard times for many folks, but they're also very exciting times. These are times of vast change, and where I was leading to is that what many artists are doing today is being done without a real kind of definition or term. It's hard to describe in the English language what we are doing. I mean, this is, when you talk about breaking this Eurocentric mold of thinking and learning and how we acknowledge and honor knowledge, that's something that through many traditions, folks have been doing for many years. I know in many African cultures, traditionally, there wasn't a real separation from as artists or citizen.
Right.
I mean, artists were full participatory members of whatever culture that they resided in. And art was sometimes something that folks didn't even have a word for because it was such a part of life. And I think that's what many artists are working toward today. I mean, what we're doing is something that is really not, hopefully will be life-changing and hopefully will work towards changing society, but also is operating from this really, and this is where I'm going to go into our love and why we do this. I mean, this really leads into the question of why.
Right.
I mean,
right,
why
right.
are all of us involved
Right.
in this struggle? And it really comes from this deep well of love, and with that love is passion. And bringing that love and that passion together is the reason. And you know what? Many times in forums like this, and even in community forums, in my neighborhood, we don't really talk and spend enough time talking about love and really saying that's what this is. I mean, this is a love of ourselves, love of family, love of community. That's why we do this. And we really just need to identify that and talk about that love and that passion that drives us, that moves us all past this whatever point we are into this next thing. And that's what's going to take us as a society. I mean, this is like what Martin Luther King described as his beloved community. And that was his community. And, you know, and Martin Luther King described greatness. I'm glad you quoted King.
How can I not?
Exactly, exactly. Because Martin Luther King described greatness as your ability to serve. And remember that. If you don't remember anything else about Martin Luther King, remember that that we value greatness as your ability to serve.
Well, I'm going to vibe on this love principle and take it to the love that informs the revolutionary.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that Che Guevara built his revolutionary practice on. So whether it's a King or Guevara,
Right.
or folk who are trying to, in a very fundamental way, transform the society, it has to be motivated by the love that you speak of. So given that, shall we move a little bit more deeply into this connection between art and activism, and scholarship and activism, and how that has played out in your life?
Yeah, you know, and I know that this is something that's not new to everybody here in this room. You know, despite what discipline you come from, you know, artists are always able to unlock the, you know, and I'm going to even draw from the handbook for Goddard College's program in this Master of Fine Arts program in interdisciplinary arts. And one of the paragraphs that really stood out there for me was that artists are able to unlock symbolic, political, magical, spiritual, psychic, and I would even say physical powers. We engage with dialogues, here we are here, across differences together, with other folks and with people who are scientists, activists, philosophers, citizens, workers, healers. You know, we believe that art can contribute meaningfully to social justice and to the development of compassionate consciousness. I'm not sure if this is answering the question or not, but these are some of, this is going back to this motivation.
Right.
Now, going all the way back to your description of the battles that folks have had to fight for tenure,
Right.
you know, that's what's many times not recognized, is that compassionate consciousness, and it's not rewarded again.
Right, exactly.
You know, so once again, that's one of those things that we really have to build and develop. And it's, in addition, you know, to recognizing it here in this room, it's our responsibility to pass that on.
Right.
To make sure that the next generation behind us again won't have those same kind of battles.
And I'm going to push you a little bit further, and I know you're going to write back at me on this question, but talk a little bit more concretely about how this connection between art and activism plays out in your own work.
Oh, okay. Yeah. In my own work, much of my work, and this, when I was a student here at the University of Minnesota, and I should say I'm a product of the University of Minnesota, in full disclosure. You know, I've got a couple degrees from this joint. And, but early on, when I was a student in the studio arts department, people told me, Jones, you got to focus. And this was at the height of what we were defining and calling the revolution. Where people said, Jones, you got to focus. What are you going to be? You're going to be a painter? You're going to be a sculptor? You're going to work with clay? What do you want to do? You have to do one of these things. And I could never really make up my mind. Because, I mean, at that time, I was struggling with all those things, and I wanted to do all those things. And nobody at that time in the academic world recognized that. And so I left school for a long time before I came back. And what I started doing was building this socially engaged practice. As a part of that, and being swept up in the politics and the music of the times, I began to work a lot in collaboration with communities, working with a wide range of organizations and individuals, folks who were working behind bars. I helped create or build a chapel in Lionel Lakes Correctional Facility. There was this huge wealth, and there is in the prisons this huge human capital where folks had the talent and the skills that were required to literally build a chapel. The carpenters, the sculptors, the woodworkers, the electricians, they were all behind bars. And we need to recognize that wealth in our community. So outside of the prison walls, I've worked with seniors, I've worked with young folks, I've worked with adults, creating and hopefully creating work that inspires and informs. So many times when people talk about my work, they now, or describe my work, they might be, it's almost like the elephant. With the blind men and the elephant.
Oh, yes,
yeah,
right.
One feels the rope, one feels the hose, one feels the tusk. I mean, all these different things. Because I try to create this work that responds, that's site-specific, that's sometimes even temporal, that's not always permanent. This work that really describes the site and looks at the physical characteristics of the site, looks at the cultural history of the site, and the social history of the site, and uses all of that in this rich mix to create work. Now, I'm not saying anything that a lot of folks in this room don't understand. I mean, there are a lot of allies. I look out and see some of these faces, Roger Cummings, Marcus Young, Christine Baumler, all these folks who work in a real multidisciplinary way,
Right.
an interdisciplinary way, and are working also to change these elements in our environment.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense,
Okay.
and I guess that's the back at you
Well,
portion of it.
and actually, that really, that's a question for you. I mean,
Yes.
like, we heard your credentials. I know that you are this great writer and are able to pull folks together, but I also know that you have this big presence outside of here.
Mm-hmm.
Where a lot of folks that have come to the university, a lot of people out in our communities have been your students. And I hear them call you Dr. Rose, with affection.
Mm-hmm.
But I also see a lot of folks outside of here doing that as well. I mean, so I know that you have this. I mean, how do you reconcile that?
Well, I, without any hesitancy, say that I'm a scholar activist. And, of course, we came through some of the same kind of political upheaval. And I think there are generations, and that shapes you profoundly. And that how you start is to some extent where you end up. And I've always thought that there was a profound expectation. And this was, of course, part of those activists who established African American and African Studies programs and Black Studies, that the university should have relevancy within the context of the community. And if it didn't, what good was it? That there was an expectation that came out of all these communities that struggle for representation within these spaces, to be heard, to be listened to, and that struggle continues in how we imagine the relationship between the work inside the campus and the work outside of the campus. So I've never made a real division there, and I've always, as I continue to be, very active in community struggle. And in fact, I think I want to talk a little bit about how this work plays out in our classrooms. I think that I'd like people to leave with this idea of a critical classroom. And as a matter of fact, one of the organizations, one of the community organizations based in Atlanta, Georgia, that I've worked very closely with, Project South, another little bit of a plug here, has copies of this toolkit called the Critical Classroom. And it means that, community isn't simply out there. It's what we do in the spaces that we occupy within as well as out there. And for those of you who are struggling with this issue of students within community, that students can't be sent just without kind of a critical consciousness about what is at stake. And one of the things we do well in colleges and in college classrooms is raise, or theoretically we do this well, raise the critical issues around the communities in which our students operate or will potentially operate. And I think it is absolutely an essential that they understand that knowledge is socially and politically located, and that we can create critical classrooms where a kind of co-creation of knowledge can occur. And we can draw upon the knowledge of the histories of the communities out of which we come. I know very much today that there are communities very much in struggle, very much like the ones we live in currently, but beyond this, grassroots communities that are very much organizing and pushing back. There have been a couple of large events in 2007 as well as in 2010 called the United States Social Forum, where over 15 to 20,000 grassroots folk came together and asked the kind of questions that we've been asking in this conference: whose knowledge, in whose interest, and for what purpose? It seems to me that part of what we do as scholars and activists is raise critical consciousness, is do critical reflection, but also means we've got to roll up our sleeves and get involved. I'm not of the mind that you send someone anywhere, that if you're not doing the work also, and I know that isn't everyone's cup of tea, but that's very near and dear to me in terms of how this actual community university set of relationships work, and that our strategy should be very much about being in collaboration and dialogue and respectfully listening to community leadership as they articulate what is needed, and to learn from, as I've learned so much from the relationship we fostered in the context of doing the work of Afro-Eco. So I guess that would be the way I respond, to very proudly hold up the banner of scholar activism and to say that, that we have a charge of accountability as well as engagement that goes beyond the head trip to the actual digging in. And that's been my guide. That's what moves me. That's what keeps me going.
I hear you, yeah. Well, at this point, I was going to share a little work with you.
And you're going to actually close us out with this. And we're going to open it up to questions. We've said a lot, and
we have.
We've learned
Actually,
a lot.
should we open it up to questions before I go into this
work?
What's
the spirit of the room? Questions now?
Okay. All right. This is collaboration here. I'm going to share a little bit of my work, and then we'll open it up to questions, and then we'll close with this gift that we have for you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm going to go actually through this relatively quickly, looking at some of the large-scale work that I do. This is a piece at, one of the things that I try not to do is I've sat through so many slide lectures from artists, and I did this, and I did this, and I did this, and I'm going to try not to do that. And actually, if you have questions as we go on, I mean, this room isn't that big where you can't stop me and say, hey, Setu, what is that? Or where are you going with that? This is a work that I did in collaboration with another artist for the Crystal Ray High School, a private school in South Minneapolis. This piece is about 200 feet long, mixed media work. And really, what we wanted to do in an abstract way is to embody the spirit of this particular school. Anne had mentioned this drinking fountain. This drinking fountain was just done and full of controversy. I mean, just completed and installed last week. When I say full of controversy, the mayor of Minneapolis, this was an initiative of the mayor of Minneapolis. Actually, even, you know what, I'm even going to back up a little bit and tell you a little story about this piece. You're going to visit, many of you are going to visit the Heart of the Beast Theater later today. Now, this idea really came out of Sandy Spieler and the Heart of the Beast Theater. Sandy Spieler is the artistic director there, and for many years, I mean, it's in an old porn theater that had been renovated, repurposed for the Heart of the Beast Theater, and the drinking fountain never worked. And they had big water dispensers, selling bottled water, and it got to the point where they were producing so much waste with it that they wanted to get rid of the bottled water. And here we got bottled water here. But
I didn't even notice it.
But I have no mind yet either. But Sandy Spieler wanted to bring this drinking fountain back. And so she led the community through this long process of reinstalling and rebuilding the drinking fountain inside the theater. So when you go to the theater, you have to make sure you drink from that fountain when you see it in there. Now, she had mentioned this whole long process to the mayor's wife, Megan O'Hara, who's an environmentalist and an arts patron. And she, I don't know what she did to the mayor, whether she twisted his arm or whether it was pillow talk or whatever. But he initiated this project where, after the water utility in Minneapolis spent a great deal refurbishing the filters and creating this new filtration system, that it's a way to celebrate it, to install drinking fountains that were actually created by artists. So this is an idea that came from an artist through the mayor and went back to artists in different ways. So 4 of these drinking fountains were commissioned, 4 different artists in 4 locations in Minneapolis, and this was one of them. This was stainless steel right on Main Street, and it resembles, it's designed to recall an endangered mussel shell, like from one of the many mussels in the river, and water pouring out of it. It even has a pet bubbler underneath it. But but there are 2 things that really drive me, that I'm passionate about, that I've taken both a scholarly and an artistic approach to study, and that's plants and boats. And describing boats, I mean, many times when you think about boats in the African American tradition, we have this one image, and we think of this one experience that black folks have had with boats, and that's this. And that's not true. I've been fortunate to travel throughout the African diaspora, and wherever I go, I end up hanging out with boat builders. There's this rich maritime tradition that's practiced all over, even here in the U.S. One of the things that I need to do is to get to this 87-year-old brother in North Carolina, who's one of the last remaining African-American boat builders, practicing these traditional methods. But looking at these larger canoes, these ocean-going canoes from Ghana and West Africa that you see throughout West Africa, through the Caribbean, looking at this boat model there, larger boats in the Caribbean, looking at these boat yards in West Africa again that take these large logs, and now because these logs are more and more endangered, folks are just kind of repurposing these old canoes, shaving them down and just adding boards to the top of them. Looking at these smaller lake canoes inspired me to work with an African boat builder. This guy here in the hat is a master boat builder who has created, James Amakwa in Ghana, and has created hundreds, if not thousands, of boats for small fishermen's canoes. And the way they measure boats is by boards, not by feet. And so what I did is I wanted to learn the process. And so what I did was commission a canoe, a 4-board canoe, and followed and documented the process. So after the canoe was completed, we moved the canoe up to my brother-in-law's house. I have a Ghanaian brother-in-law. And tomorrow I leave for Ghana, and we're actually going to put this thing in the water. But that was all part of this process, all part of this passion. And using boat-building techniques in many of my sculptures. This is a piece of the group of students from North High. We used steam building to create this wooden sculpture in Sumner Library in North Minneapolis. They create this piece here. And the great thing about this, and working in collaboration with this group of students, this was a way that I could even return something to my neighborhood and my community. Absolutely. This was the library that my mother, when we lived in the Sumner Field homes, what we used to just call the projects, when my mother would drag my sister and I, the library where my mother would drag my sister and I, and we learned to read books from this library. Absolutely. So this is a great way of returning this gift that this community had given me.
And it's a beautiful library.
It is.
It is a very
It really
library.
is. An old Carnegie library that's been renovated. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That you've taught classes in.
That's right, exactly. In the community.
That's right. It's a group of students from Gordon Parks High School, working on a pontoon that we finished out, took on the water to test it out. This is in the testing phase here to actually prove it worked. And then installed this piece on a pond in the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum. This is actually a play on words, the title of this. This is called Watershed. And it was a way that people could actually contemplate the watershed. So the learning in this and working with this group of students, it had a lot of different connections. I mean, teaching them about good stewardship for water. And this is also a part of Afro-Eco's mission, and to increase the eco-literacy of African Americans in particular and all of us in general. Now, the latest boat that I created was in Port Townsend, one of the centers of wooden boat building. And now the director of the Goddard program, the MFA-IA program that I teach in is here. But when I was first asked if I could come out there, I jumped at that chance. Goddard has 2 campuses, one in Port Townsend, the other one in Vermont. But knowing that Port Townsend was a center of wooden boat building, that was a drag, the thing that drug me out there. And it was always my hidden agenda to build a boat. Now, we just built this boat and launched it just about a month ago. Small boat that students now can, worked with students on this, that students now can take out into the Puget Sound. And collard greens have been my entry into plants and planting. As a way to access African American culture, what I've done is created collard green installations. Like this shrine, I've created a couple shrines in different places. This is at, or inside of one of the houses in Project Row houses. At some point in time, Imagining America, or Imagining America, needs to go to Houston and visit Project Row houses, a community center / art center that was really created by and for artists, African American artists living in the 3rd Ward of Houston, saved a number of shotgun houses, and now 2 times a year they bring artists there to create these installations inside of them. And when I went there, I planted a garden of collards in front and outside and in back of this small shotgun house, and built this shrine inside. As, like I said, as a way of accessing African American culture. I also collected collard green recipes here. That's a window, and what I did is I just stretched canvas over the walls, and I stretched canvas and painted that canvas, but stretched it as an archway, even just to recall medieval church in some sense, to make the space even more suggestive of being sacred. You know, working with recycled cardboard boxes, working with a group of students at Bates College, created this installation, and also planted collard greens in the traffic circle outside of the museum. And after those greens were harvested, they went into the food system there. A few years ago, this was my backyard. And I say a few years ago because my wife and I have every year take out more and more turf. But we started at that time even just mowing the turf, or I should say I started doing it in different ways. And part of the reason, and some of you guys have heard this before, part of the reason I did that and cut these patterns in here was so that I could just mow half of the lawn, too. You know, shaped like grenades, using a rich mix of compost and clay and seeds, created these bombs for peace. Now, when you talk about activism, I mean, this is one of the things that I created this mold of an old World War II era grenade to just think about these things as these bombs for peace. And with this mold, during the time the Republican convention was here.
A couple of years ago.
Yeah, I was even thinking before that I could take this mold and make snowballs. And I did. And I put them in the freezer, and I thought, that's what I'm going to do during the Republican convention, throw these snowball grenades. But by the time the Republican convention came around on one of the hottest days of summer.
It was one of the hottest.
Yeah, I went to the freezer, and those things had congealed into ice. You know, so you would still be like trying to get me out of jail. Now, have the freeze say two movement. But, and thinking about these things, this is an old method, something that's thousands of years old, that artists and I maintain, here I am too as a senior fellow in agricultural systems, working on advocating for urban agriculture.
That's
and this
right.
is also part of the mission for Afro-Eco. I mean, to really have us focus on sustainable food production. But art is older than agriculture. We've been able to find art throughout the world that's 100,000 years old. Agriculture is only 10,000 years old. And so I maintain that the first farmers were actually artists. They were people who could probably recognize patterns,
I think you're right.
make these observations, and then conduct these experiments to create our food system today. But this is a method that people have used for a long time for seeding fields. We can use this to seed our community on vacant plots of land and your neighbor's bare spot in their lawn. This is a great place to put these seed bombs. And so, what's next for us? We have, actually, we should go into questions. And before we go into
that's
this
the part. This ends our
Yeah.
formal conversation, and then we're going to open it up for a fuller dialogue. So thank you all. So, and Kevin, what is our time looking like? What, 15 minutes maybe?
About 15, 20 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, good. But last 5 minutes, I need to give another spiel. Oh, I was wondering what that was. I felt something, and then. Yeah. No hard questions.
This is simple. You said the water fountain was controversial.
Oh,
And
you know, I didn't. Yeah, I forgot to. Yeah, I started
I wanna hear
talking
the end of the
about the
story.
mayor, and I got let off there. The controversy surrounded the amount of money that each drinking fountain costs, and the fact that the mayor at that time was running for governor. And so a lot of his opponents, in particular the Republicans, but even a few of the Democrats, pointed at him and said that, you know, look at all the money that the city of Minneapolis is wasting on drinking fountains by artists. You know, that's a waste of money, poor use of city resources when we're having to lay off firemen and policemen. Even though the money for the drinking fountains came from the water utility and people's water utility bills and was part of a surplus that they had, you know, that didn't matter anymore. And so that was part of the controversy. Most recently, there was a critical article written about these drinking fountains, these 4 drinking fountains, just 2 weeks ago. And the main criticism, the biggest criticism of my drinking fountain was that when or the one that I worked on, was that it's all metal, and in the heat of the summer, the water heats up inside the fountain. And so when the water runs out, initially it's warm. And so he talked to a couple people that were complaining about the warm water coming out of the drinking fountain. And I just think, God, have we turned into babies that much? I mean, it's wet, it's this resource, and if you run it for like 5 seconds, it's cold, you know? So anyway, those are some of the controversies.
Like oftentimes from on high, controversy is seen as a deficiency of the art, but it seems like it's one way of thinking about what's distinctive about community knowledge, that it allows differences to be sustained within the community. And I wonder if you might just speak to some of the controversies that have sort of percolated up, or if there have been some that have helped folks to bear those differences and to disclose them.
You know, all of us really need to, you know, we're not in enough forums like this even where we can exchange ideas, where we can share love, where we can exchange ideas, and we can have a critical dialogue. And we're not in enough forums like that in our neighborhoods, in our communities. And it's from these rich dialogues, from that controversy, from that tension that sometimes exists, that we can move ahead or really help to build some sort of solution. Going all the way back to why we're here today, I mean, that's part of how universities can engage with communities by helping foster those questions and those tensions that exist. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question.
Well, you know, I think the insularity that you're referring to, it bedevils all these spaces. We listen too singularly and too much to the same voices. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the most profound spaces I've been in have been in spaces where the voice of reason and knowledge doesn't come from the person you expect it. It comes from someone who typically has been at the vineyard doing the work, observing quietly. But a lot of times we're not in spaces and places to hear that. And I think the potential of you know, breaking these silos around university and community is that not only is the university out there, but that knowledge has to come in here in some ways. And then when those spaces are opened up more broadly, we perhaps can come up with some of the solutions that are rooted very organically some people call it the subaltern, but you know, the structures that constrain that really have to be broken open. And I know that they're not broken open easily, whether it be on the community side or on the university side.
That's right. And actually, that reminds me of a little quick story. In a community meeting, you know, I was describing some of the work that I do, and this guy stood up and said, "Hey, man, what you're trying to do is put the culture in agriculture." and I thought, damn, that's right. Exactly. Exactly. And from that community gathering, I used that. I said, man, I'm going to steal that. If I can use that over and over again.
Let them take it with them.
Yeah, exactly.
Y'all take that one.
I have a question. Yeah, this question is for Setu mostly, but also for Rose, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about the Frogtown Urban Garden, the idea that you were going to develop an urban garden on the Wilder space, and what interests me about that is the way in which it exposes differences inside of community. We've talked about some of the tensions inside of the university around these collaborations. But it seems to me that it's also really important not to think about the community as this kind of monolithic space.
Right, absolutely.
That's not structured in its own kinds of dominance.
Absolutely. Now, in full disclosure, Leola teaches at McAllister College. Now, part of the reason I say that, and the only reason I say that, is because some of the faculty at McAllister has been involved in this long dialogue, and I see a lot of the familiar faces here have been involved in this long dialogue, building what we think will be a very real relationship. Initially, we didn't know quite where this was going. And now it's taking on more form, or putting more meat on the skeleton. And the it that we're describing, what Leola asked about, was this initiative in Frogtown to create a farm / park. Right now, there's a 13-acre site in Frogtown that is the site of the former Wilder Foundation, their headquarters. They've moved on University in Lexington, leaving this space, and it's this great resource. One of the ways that Frogtown is also deficient is in green space. Frogtown has the least amount of park space per child than any other neighborhood in St. Paul. And so here is this opportunity to create and preserve this open space in Frogtown. Now, part of what we're talking about, too, is that there are folks who have other ideas on how that space should be used. There's a group of us that think that that space should remain open, and that part of it could be connected, could be a farm, at least 4 or 5 acres of that. I mean, it's pristine almost. The buildings have come down there, the headquarters, and so leaving this kind of rolling field there. But there are also folks that feel that housing should be there. Now, our response to that is that right now there are almost 300 vacant houses, lots, and properties in Frogtown, and that's really where we should place our effort in restoring that, and not create another housing development that will impede this site from being open space forever. This is not just the chance of a lifetime. This is our only chance to create a park or a green space there. And so we say over and over again that this is going to be a long journey, and we're trying to elicit as many partners as we can. So we've been working with folks from McAllister, working with folks from the University of Minnesota, working with people from Hamlin, from a wide range of institutions, and community institutions. The Frogtown Neighborhood Association has been very valuable. And I could sit going on, but I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, just another observation about let's not get locked into homogeneity, and we could go into the many conversations about what is community. But it is very, very clear that interests are widely dispersed, and that if we talk about class and race and gender and sexuality and our intersectionalities in these academic spaces, those isms are everywhere.
That's right.
And the whole interest question in whose interest. It is a struggle. It's a political and a social struggle wherever you are. And I think there is a bit of a naivete in, or even a kind of mythicizing when you think that we're singularly talking about a
Absolutely.
homogeneous community. So
Absolutely.
that was a good catch, and I think we should be well aware that these are always contested spaces, however and whatever we're doing. So just to throw that into the mix.
That's right.
Hi, I'm Kelly Quinn, and I have the microphone, so I guess it's my turn to ask a question. I'm from Miami University. I'm Kelly Quinn. I'm delighted to have heard this, and thanks, Ann Waltner, for helping make this possible. Seytu Jones, I'm delighted to hear you call the name of Sumner Field Homes. And in particular, this kind of follows on the thinking about communities and the particularities of place. I'm wondering for both of you, are there ways in which your childhood homes or family homes and communities nurtured your aesthetics and your scholar activism?
Yes, and yes, and yes. I'm an Oklahoman. My heritage is African and Native, and I lived in an African American community, but always that indigenous connection was in the shadows of our lives, especially through my grandmother's teaching and work and her healing potentials. And my dad always had a garden. Unfortunately, I was always with the nose in a book, and I probably should have paid a little bit more attention to his extraordinary growing skills. But I've come full circle, right?
Yes, you have. Yes, you have.
And speaking of, the community's hands on you, no doubt that the expectation that you had to be involved in the struggle in one way or another was seeded, if you will, literally, in my church, in my school, and those things that come early don't leave you, do they?
No, they don't. They sure don't.
And always in the whole wisdom of if much has been given, much is expected.
That's right.
So that's cultural knowledge, don't you think?
Oh, it is. It is. No,
What about you?
Yeah. No, it's the same thing with me. I grew up in this great big extended family. My sister and I, everybody in our generation was expected to excel. I grew up with a father who was a painter, another uncle who was a painter. Now, both of them, and they always were so proud of me and my accomplishments because, at that time in the 50s, there weren't as many opportunities for them. They both ended up retiring from the post office. Both ended up working in the post office.
And that's
both
a whole
of them
other story about black people in the post
exactly,
office.
right, with PhDs, and, yeah, right.
And about to be closed.
Exactly, that's right. I'm not losing that opportunity now. I mean, that's a trip. How that's come full circle, but. And then I had a group of aunts that sewed, and I never thought that I couldn't be an artist. They always told me that I could do this. And they told all of us, my sister and my cousins, over and over again how smart we were. I mean, to the point where we actually began to believe it. and were able to begin to carry out these things. And they were our biggest supporters. That uncle who was a painter, when he passed, I went down to St. Louis to help my cousin clean out his studio because he had started painting again after he retired in his office space. We were going through his files and found this folder. My wife would attest to this. That was nieces and nephews in the news, and it had all these clippings that they had passed around to each other, and while they slapped us in the butt, they also slapped us on the back. and continue to do that in different ways.
Absolutely.
And one of the things I was just saying too, and I'm going to finish here, is that after thanking my father for about the 500th time for lending me money, one of the things he told me is make sure that you do the same thing for your kids and grandkids. Mm-hmm. And now I can say with pride that my 2 grandchildren are artists. One is here editing this video, and another one is at Columbia College now, focusing on printmaking. So.
Yeah, one more question, and then we will give you the final 5 minutes.
Okay.
First, I just wanted to thank you for this. This has been, I think, very inspirational for many of us. And one of the kind of underlying currents I feel or sense in this conversation has been about courage. Courage in the face of a tenure system, courage to love in a society where we've generally been told to fear. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you both could talk a little bit about how you've cultivated that over time. I think you've talked about it just now a bit, but I wonder, how do you cultivate that?
Mm-hmm. I like that term, courage. I think it's a term we need to hear every day of our lives.
I'm going to add that to that list. Thanks for that.
Add that to the list. And, none of us do this alone. Despite, living in a society that says singularly we're individuals, I don't think I could continue to do what I've tried to do without the many, many people, from my family to the activists that, when you talk about courage, I'm telling you, I've seen some of the most courageous people in the world take on some of the hardest issues in the world. And that gives you the energy and the commitment to go on. So hold those relationships dear and make those relationships, because if we're left to our own devices, you know what that sometimes leads to.
Oh, right.
So a quick answer to your question is the community, the relationships, the people who have tons of courage, who continue to inspire me, and I try to stay very close to. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, every day I step out there, you never know what's going to happen. These are, as I said before, these are really hard times for a lot of folks. And if you listen to the media enough, you would be afraid to step outside your door.
Some people are, too.
Yeah, you're right. There are a lot of folks who are. And so during these times, we have the real courage is to really draw on that love that we have for each other, and not be afraid to embrace folks. My friend Tacumba, who's back here, another great artist, I asked earlier, where's Tacumba? And they said, oh, he's up there hugging people. And that's that's part of his signature. I mean, part of the way that we share that. Now, that takes a great deal of courage and training yourself to do that. I mean, I am afraid of what the future holds there. I mean, we don't know what's out there. But we have to continue to draw from that love and the love that we have for family, community, and the world, each other, to keep going. Anything else?
I think it's time for you now.
Cool, okay. Well, at the very beginning, Rose talked about this metaphor of a seed and how we want to plant seeds, seeds of change. And these seeds, I'm going to send all of you out with seeds today. I want you to help me on this art project that we'll be working on for the next year, leading up to our conference, the Black Environmental Thought Conference 2. What I need your help in is helping me plant the world's largest field of collards. So what I'm going to do is send you home with a seed. at the exits here, when you leave, there are these little pieces of paper, slips of paper with a seed glued to them, and along with instructions. And the paper is handmade paper. My next door neighbor is a paper maker who's actually gotten now an international reputation for her work. But she gave me this paper, and this paper will, made from these environmentally friendly materials like plants, flax, cotton, and water, will go back and nurture the soil. So you're going to take away this seed, plant it in the ground next season, and then I want you to upload your collard plant to the Facebook page that's Field of Collards on it. And we'll begin to collect these collards, these seeds and stories that will go on around the world and help us, you know, it'll be one of the points on our conference. So maybe that's a hook to get you back here again.
I hope so.
So on your way out, please, oh, and one other plug. You know, Goddard College, around these very themes, is sponsoring a conference October 14th through 16th called Making Meaning in Context that's really come out of the MFA program there. So if you get a chance, pick one of these up as well, too. They're going to be on a table. Any other plugs that we got here? So.
All right,
Well, yeah, we can't thank you enough. This has been just absolutely fabulous.
Well, thank you.